actually, I need my model. Can you guys pass me the model?
This diagram is back here. Kind of like under there. Then it comes through.
Before we do the cat, let's look at the human. This is a human model. Okay, this bone up here, this bone up here is the hyoid bone. Okay, these two big plates right here, these are the thyroid cartilages. The thyroid glands would sit right here, one on each side, like little saddlebags, a little piece of tissue holding together. Okay. The bump in the front, the ventral median prominence, that's the Adam's apple. Okay. If we turn this around, you see these two cartilages right here? Can somebody squeeze those? I don't want to do it, my fingers are dirty. Squeeze those together. Push hard. Okay. See how they move the vocal folds? On the top. There you go.
There we go.
Right? Those are called the arytenoid cartilages, and those are attached to the vocal folds to move the vocal folds in and out. Okay? And this thing right here, this little flappy thing, that is the epiglottis. Okay? Down here, this is the trachea. Okay? And the trachea has these sort of C-shaped pieces of cartilage to keep it open. You don't want your trachea collapsing, right? So it's real stiff. There's only one that goes all the way around. See how it's open in the back? Only one piece of cartilage goes all the way around, and that's called the cricoid cartilage, and that's the very first one right underneath those big thyroid plates. Okay, all the other ones are open in the back, and laying in this open space right here is the esophagus. So when you swallow, that epiglottis is forced down, it blocks off the trachea so food doesn't go down the wrong pipe, right? And it actually forces the food back down the esophagus. Okay? So if we look in the cat, you can feel right here, you can feel those hard thyroid cartilages, these big plates right there. And the bump in the front, this one's not too obvious. The bump in the front is the Adam's apple. Okay? If you feel right up here, you can actually feel the hyoid. Right? Remember those sternohyoid muscles were attached way up here to the hyoid bone, right up here. And then if you feel down here, you can see the cartilage rings on the trachea. And if you feel in the back, you'll feel that it's open. Okay, there's no rings in the back. Okay, lying right behind that trachea is this big flexible pipe right here, and that's the esophagus. And it's really flexible because it has to expand when that bolus of food comes in, right? Okay. Coming down here, these are lungs, right here and here. And that one's just kind of hanging out there, so we'll just put it back in, okay? So those are the lungs. This is the heart, fatty heart, that's the heart. And this tissue right here, and it's interesting because a lot of the cats don't have this. This tissue right here, at least some of this tissue, not the fat, right here, right above the heart, that's the thymus gland. As we get older, the thymus gland is reabsorbed. So if you were to look in my chest, I wouldn't have a thymus. You guys are a little bit younger, you might have some left, but as you get older, it goes away. Okay, so like our older cats, they don't have them either. So that's the thymus. Coming down on either side of the heart are long nerves. Are long nerves that are going to innervate the diaphragm. So if we look right, if I can get it, where the heck is it? It's right here. Right here. Nope, that wasn't it. That was fat. What happened to your phrenic nerves? This one on this side. Okay. If we look over here, I have to look down here. There is a big long nerve right here that goes right into the diaphragm, which is this right here, this thin, flat muscle right here. This is the diaphragm, and this is the phrenic nerve. These nerves innervate the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a muscle, so it has to contract and relax, right? So it means you have to have nerves going there to give them that signal. And there's a nerve, a big phrenic nerve that runs down on this side, and the other one hasn't been prosected out yet, but there's a big one that runs along this side, right alongside of the heart. They come right down, right to the diaphragm. Okay? Those are the phrenic nerves. This again is the diaphragm. The diaphragm separates your chest from your abdomen, right? Because you have to keep this as a closed cavity, because in order to breathe, you have to be able to change pressure. So if this is open to the outside, you can't change pressure, so you can't breathe. So if I were to shoot you right here, even though I probably wouldn't hit anything, if I open up your chest cavity so it's not a sealed cavity anymore, you're not going to be able to breathe unless you plug that hole, because you won't be able to change pressure. Okay? So that's what the diaphragm does. It seals off your thoracic cavity. Okay? Then, having said that, however, the esophagus here has to go to the stomach. The stomach is in your abdominal cavity, not in your thoracic cavity. So the esophagus has to travel through that diaphragm to get to the stomach. And if we follow that down and look where it goes through, it's way back here. Right? Here's our esophagus coming down. And that's going to go through this diaphragm and come out on this side, right above the stomach. Okay? The space where that goes through the diaphragm is called the hiatus. And sometimes that can rip. That opening can actually rip. And then you have abdominal contents coming up into the chest.
Hiatal hernia.
That's a hiatal hernia. That happens a lot with preemies, and then they have to go in and sew that off, obviously. Okay? So that's the hiatus. Then once we get into the abdominal cavity, all of that stuff that you just swallowed is going to end up in your stomach. And this is the cat stomach here. It's kind of a J-shaped organ. Big body here, and then a little horn piece over here. Okay, so this is all stomach. If you feel right where that esophagus meets the top of the stomach, there is a sphincter there. The sphincter is like a purse string of muscle, so when the food comes down and goes into the stomach, that closes to keep the stuff in the stomach. If it doesn't, or it doesn't close properly, then you get some of that acidic chyme, because the acid, the pH of the stomach is about 2. So if that sphincter doesn't work properly, then you get some of that acid contents from the stomach washing back up on the end of the esophagus, and that's a problem. Because unlike the stomach, the esophagus does not have a thick mucus coating on it to protect it from the acid, so you would erode, you would burn holes in the end of your esophagus, right? That's gastrointestinal reflux disease. The stomach itself, on the inside, there are 2 types of glands. One type produces the mucus, and there's a real thick mucus layer on the inside of your stomach to protect the stomach lining, and the other produces the acid. So once we get that stuff in there, we're going to turn it around, mix it around. It's going to come out in like a slurry called chyme, acid chyme. And this stomach has not been opened yet. But if we open up the stomach and you look on the inside of the stomach, you see all these extra folds of tissue. So that's called the rugae of the stomach. And that's, you need extra tissue so that the stomach can expand when the food comes in. All right, this big thing right here, right under the diaphragm, here's our diaphragm, this organ right here, the biggest abdominal organ right here, this is the liver, okay? And if you'll notice, the liver is actually connected to the diaphragm. That piece of tissue right there is called the falciform ligament, and its job is to hold the liver up there under the diaphragm, keep it in place, okay? And if we kind of push our liver apart here a little bit, this one's really stiff, but this organ right here, this little bulb right there, that's the gallbladder. So the liver produces bile, which is a combination of salts, right? And the bile is stored in the gallbladder. And sometimes some of that salt can precipitate out of solution and form little crystals, which we call gallstones. And those gallstones can actually block this duct. This is the cystic duct coming out of the gallbladder, and if some of those stones get stuck in that duct, it's excruciatingly painful. Excruciatingly painful. Also, coming out of the liver, there are other ducts coming down. Okay, so here's our gallbladder, right? And this is our cystic duct coming down from the gallbladder. But you also have ducts over here coming in from the liver, from other parts of the liver. Those are hepatic ducts. And those both unite into a large duct called the common bile duct, which is in this whole mess of goo right here somewhere. Big common bile duct. So you got stuff coming from the gallbladder coming down, you've got secretions from the liver coming in, and you also have secretions from the pancreas all coming into this big duct. And that duct empties right at where the stomach meets the intestines. Okay? Because the function of the bile is to act as an emulsifier for fat. It breaks up big globs of fat into little droplets of fat. It makes it easier to digest. That's why people who have had their gallbladders out have to watch their diet. They really shouldn't have a fatty diet because it's going to cause them a lot of distress. So that's got to come in. Secretions from the liver carry digestive enzymes, and the digestive function of the pancreas is to produce a whole array of digestive enzymes. And the thing is, all of those secretions come into that area right after the stomach, and they're very alkaline, very basic. Okay, and that's really important because remember, pH of 2 in here, right? All this goo has a pH of 2. The small intestines, like the esophagus, is also not protected by a thick mucus coat. So the next problem to overcome is the fact that the stuff in the stomach is so acidic, and we have no protection on the inside of the small intestines. So two things. One is bringing all of those digestive enzymes in that alkaline solution is important because that's going to neutralize the acid. But we also have to regulate how much of that acid stuff is released at one time. We can't just let it all flood in there. So there's another sphincter at this end of the stomach, right where it meets the small intestines, right there. And that's called the pyloric sphincter. And that's just going to let little droplets of that acid chime in at a time so that it can be neutralized right away. Okay? So again, here's our stomach. This area up here is called the fundus of the stomach, the top end. Then this is the body, and this is the pyloric end. That's the pyloric sphincter, right where it ends. Okay? So now, let's say we've done everything properly, and we've got our food now into our small intestines, and we've neutralized it. This first sort of not terribly curly part of the small intestines, this flat part right here, this first U shape, which is the first 3 or 4 inches, is called the duodenum. It's in the duodenum where chemical digestion is completed. Okay, it's broken down as much as we can break down in the duodenum. Okay? Then all of the rest of this small intestine stuff here is for absorption, to absorb all the nutrients that we just broke down. Okay? The whole middle part here, the really curly part, is called jejunum. And then the last couple of inches is called ileum. The last U here at the end is called the ileum. And then that connects to the large intestine, which is right here. This guy's really slimy. Which is right here. The large intestines, if you look, the diameter is much larger, and there's a lot less of it than our small intestines. Okay? Where that small intestines, where that ileum meets the large intestines, there is also a valve called the ileocecal valve, and that regulates flow from the small to the large intestines. And there's also this little nub here, this little sac right here, if I can hear that. This little sac right here, this little nub, that's called the cecum in the cat. If this were a human, our appendix would be hanging off here. So if I were to put this in the cat the way it's supposed to be oriented, it would be like this. Okay? And then we would have an ascending, a transverse, and a descending colon. Okay, so just like in humans, you have your ascending, transverse, and descending, and at the bottom of that ascending branch is where the appendix is, way down low in that quadrant. Okay? The large intestines is actually, pull all junk out of the way. So this is our large intestines. It is actually, the descending part is actually attached to the back body wall by this membrane right here. That's called mesocolon. And that's really important that we keep that in that orientation, because if that gets twisted, then you get a blockage. Okay? So we come down the descending large intestines, and then we can't see it yet, but down in here, next would be the rectum, where the waste is stored and compact, and then finally elimination through the anus. Okay? If we look at this mesentery here, we open this up a little bit, you can see all of those blood vessels for absorption. We need to absorb the nutrients into the blood, then all these blood vessels eventually go through the liver where it's filtered, and then out to the body. Okay, so this is all the mesentery here. Okay? We also want to look at the pancreas. So we said the pancreas produces all these digestive enzymes that go in at the common bile duct. The pancreas goes from the duodenum, that first part of the small intestines, which is this. This is all pancreas tissue here. Goes along here, goes under the stomach, and it attaches over on this side to this thing here that looks kind of like beef teriyaki. This thing here. This is actually spleen. It's not a digestive organ, but it's here, so it's the spleen. So from the spleen, the pancreas goes here, all the way under the stomach, and then up here onto the duodenum. That's all pancreas tissue. Okay? Everything in the intestine and everything in the abdominal cavity is covered by this fatty apron, this stuff. This gooey stuff here. Can't even straighten it out. Stuff here. This is actually called omentum. And all of this stuff is called the greater omentum because it is actually attached to the greater curve of the stomach, the large curve of the stomach here. This is all greater omentum. On the smaller curve of the stomach on the inside